Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to yet another Wednesday webinar. We will be getting started in about 8 minutes, but I wanted to log in and say hello. I see a lot of you are logging in early. I see some new names, so welcome, new people. Welcome back, Teresa. Glad to see you as always. If you are in one of those states, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, and Georgia in particular that I know of, that requires a lot of live CEUs for your renewals, please let your colleagues know that we offer at least 50 hours of live webinars every year as part of our unlimited CEU package for $99. So for those of you who need them, we've done that to provide an added benefit to you. We're definitely the lowest cost provider for the live CEUs, with the exception of the occasional free thing that your local professional counselor or social work association may offer. So welcome, Lucretia. Welcome, Tea Time, Enola. Oh, and yes, well, Maryland is another one of those too. So all y'all people in Maryland, sorry, I threw in the Southern in there, but please let your colleagues know. That really helps us out. We are a very small business. There's 3 of us that work here. And it really helps us get the word out to people who need the live webinars. Additionally, thank you, Kate, for passing it along. Additionally, everyone, what I was going to say. Oh, the next 2 Saturdays, I am doing a sort of a CEU blitz because I did have so many people asking for more live hours. We need them because we're renewing at the end of the month. I will be doing 3 hours on the connection between trauma and personality disorders this Saturday, and 3 hours on the neuroscience of mental health the following Saturday. So if you are an unlimited member, then you will be able to access those as part of your membership. Since I'm doing those as add-ons, if you're not an unlimited member and you just want to attend those 2 events, you can actually purchase those a la carte. But again, if you're an unlimited member, they're included, because I made the promise to y'all that any live webinars I do would be included in your unlimited. So that's the way it goes. Thank you, Ashton, for passing it along to the Texas clinicians as well. Super big state, super, super helpful. I will be glad to see you, Enola, at the BPD trauma one this weekend. I really enjoy both of those. Are topics that I really love talking about. So I will have to contain my enthusiasm. Last weekend's webinar, it was a 5-hour webinar on ethics. And, God bless everybody who hung in with me. We actually had some fun. I am doing the longer webinars through a video platform, much like Zoom. That way we have more opportunity to potentially interact sort of without the delay, and that we can have a conversation back and forth instead of communicating through text. So I enjoy doing it more that way. And I think when you're with me, I won't say stuck with me, but when you're with me for 3 hours, it's certainly more engaging to be able to actively participate like you would in a course. So hello, Godheart. Hello, Carissa. I am glad you like the detailed nature of the videos. We are definitely different than some of the other channels out there, and that is intentional. I really want to, you can get the highlights from other channels, but I really want to do the deep dives here on this channel and make sure that I'm providing information not only for clinicians, but information that's understandable for the general public. Hello, Ivan. Let's see, I'm trying to go back up over the people I didn't say hi to when you came in. Hello, Maria and Philippa. Sean, welcome. All righty. We've still got about 2 more minutes to go. Drum roll, please. But what things do you think are creating barriers in terms of communication and creating defensiveness in people? The ethics videos will be re-released as part of the on-demand courses probably next week sometime. Hello, Christina. Welcome to all you clinicians that are here from here to actually get CEUs. I know this topic, we may be getting people who are here just to learn and don't necessarily need CEUs. You are welcome, very welcome as well. Please pass this information on. This is one that's not going to be super clinical, so it's one that may be useful to pass on to your clergy, your teachers associations, maybe even your boss. Oh, thank you for that feedback, Maria. I am glad that it is helpful for you. And for those of you for whom English is a second language, it doesn't happen during the live recording because YouTube can't keep up, but we do offer subtitles, so you can select the subtitle in your preferred language once we upload them. And the on-demand classes at all CEUs have the subtitles turned on. Thank you very much, CNS. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started because this is a really fun topic in my opinion, but I have a lot of opinions. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's presentation on listening without defensiveness. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. In this presentation, we're going to explore what causes defensiveness and identify strategies to enhance assertiveness. And I think if you have been, breathing over the past few years, I have noticed, and I think a lot of you probably have noticed, a strong increase in defensiveness in people's communications. So we're going to take a look at why that is and strategies to address it, because your organization is not going to be able to work effectively if the staff are defensive with one another. If you are working with a client and the client is defensive, or likewise you become defensive, once we put that defensive wall up, we're not going anywhere. So let's talk about what's going on. All behavior has meaning. I've said that probably 100 times in my videos. All behavior has meaning. You get up, you go get something to eat. What is the meaning of that behavior? Does it mean, hey, I'm hungry and I need to get something to eat? Or, hey, I'm bored. Do I want to get something to eat? Or, hey, I'm really trying to get a little bit of a dopamine rush here, so I'm going to go get some chocolate. Whatever it is or means to you is the communication underlying that behavior. All behavior has meaning. Defensiveness is a behavior that indicates a lack of a sense of safety. When we become defensive, we're putting up our defenses. We're putting up our walls. And the only reason we would do that is if we felt unsafe. We don't build walls if there's no need to, in reality as well as metaphorically. Prior learning of unsafeness in relationships can trigger a lack of a sense of safety. If people have betrayed you before, if people have become verbally aggressive with you before, if people have invalidated or disrespected you in the past, then it's likely that there is a part of your brain that says, okay, this person may be possible of disrespecting me or being verbally aggressive towards me. So I am going to start out being on the defense. I am going to start out assuming that they're going to lash out. That way, if they do, I've got my walls up. How does that impact us? And we're going to talk about that more in a minute. Prior learning of unsafeness can be a trauma experience, a traumatic experience. And if we continue to feel unsafe communicating with others, then it can contribute to defensiveness. It can contribute to proactive, if you will, defensiveness, because we're assuming that everybody out there is dangerous. And discussing triggering material can also cause defensiveness in people. Whatever that triggering material is, when people start to feel afraid or feel angry, then they're in fight or flight. When we're in fight or flight, what are we going to do? We're going to fight or we're going to flee. Now let's talk about defensiveness. Defensiveness can be both fight and flee. We can be defensive and be verbally aggressive in response, or we can be defensive and just completely shut down and check out. It's like, I'm not even listening. Defensiveness is a type of aggression. My thoughts and feelings matter and yours do not. That's what we're communicating when we get defensive, whether we're trying to change somebody else's mind. We're telling them their thoughts and feelings are wrong. That's a boundary violation. You're violating their physical as well as, or not their physical, their cognitive as well as their emotional boundaries. That's not okay. It's not okay when people do that to you either, when they tell you how you should feel. Well, you feel how you feel, and that's a different video. Defensiveness also communicates, this makes me uncomfortable and I refuse to hear you. It could be what you're saying contradicts my beliefs and it makes me uncomfortable, so I don't want to hear you. Or it could be what you're saying is what I know to be true and I don't want to acknowledge that. So I am going to fight it. I'm going to yes, but it until the cows come home. And when I say yes, but, what I mean is when you're talking with somebody and you say, well, you could solve this problem this way. And they say, well, yes, I could, but, all right, you give them another suggestion. They respond the same way. Yes, butting is a form of resistance, if you will. And they may be being defensive. They're defending against what you're saying for some reason. And we need to figure out what that reason is. In other videos, we've talked about the pieces of people's lives. And anything we do generally affects all pieces of our life. Pieces stands for physical, interpersonal, emotional, cognitive, environmental, and spiritual. So think about it. And you can add in the chat room your thoughts as we go through this. How does each of the following either act as a trigger or vulnerability for defensiveness? Oh, you're like, huh? I thought we were just talking about listening. Well, we are, but physically, if you are exhausted and in pain, do you tend to be more irritable than when you're not? If you do, I know I do, that can create a situation where you're already kind of in that fight or flight a little bit. And so you may be more likely to react with defensiveness when somebody provides feedback to you, for example. So Physically, if somebody gets in your space, you could become physically defensive. That's not really what we're talking about today, but physically, somebody getting into your space could be a trigger. But physical issues that are causing you to feel uncomfortable, that are causing you to feel unsafe, may create a situation where you're more likely to respond with aggression, with defensiveness. Interpersonally. Now, interpersonal relationships, your prior experiences in interpersonal relationships shape what you expect from future interactions, both with that person and with other people. So when you're interacting with somebody after you've had bad interactions with people in the past, that could serve as a trigger for defensiveness. If I'm going in to talk to my boss, and my boss has always been difficult to deal with, then I'm probably going to go in there kind of primed to be defensive. If I'm getting called in to my boss's office and I don't know why, that triggers my anxiety. I'm like, oh crap, what did I do? So I may be going in there already defensively primed, if you will. So we need to examine the facts in this context at this time. And I should have put FitCat up there before, but the mnemonic for that, facts in this context at this time, is FitCat. And it's an easy saying to remember for people, so to help them get regrounded and not push assumptions onto people. Emotionally, if we are upset, if we are angry, if we are not feeling our best, then we may become more defensive. Cognitively, if you're experiencing brain fog, if you're completely overwhelmed, if you've got like 16 things going through your head, or if you're just in a negative mindset, then you may be more likely to perceive people's communications as attacks against you, so you may be more likely to react with defensiveness. Environmentally, and this is, something that we can consider in certain environments. Do you tend to be more defensive? When you're at home, you may tend to be very relaxed, but when you are in a big meeting and somebody calls you out in the middle of the meeting and provides constructive feedback, you may be a little more defensive. Where I used to work, we used to call it throwing people under the bus. And people would often not respond well to that, especially if it was done in front of everybody. Why? Let's think about that. In that environment where you're surrounded by your peers and your superiors, having somebody point out a weakness or a flaw or something you didn't do well can make you feel rejected or inadequate in some way. So a lot of times you may become defensive to try to save face. And spiritually, if you're not feeling a sense of connection to the world, if you're not seeing how what you do impacts the world and how the world impacts you, if it's the world is revolving around you as opposed to revolving around the sun, then you can tend to get more defensive because it feels like it's all about me. And if something goes bad, it's my fault. Well, then that's going to put me on the defensive. Thinking about how defensiveness impacts each of the above. And this is the one I really wanted to get to. Physically, when we're defensive, that means we are in a state. It may be a mild state, but we're in a state of fight or flight. And I know it's fight, flee, freeze, fawn, or flop. Those are our 5 stress reactions. But we're in a threat state, okay? And when you're in a threat state, then you're going to tend to be more hypervigilant. Your muscles are going to tend to be tenser, which can make pain worse. You may not sleep as well if you're defensive. If you have a meeting tomorrow and you're expecting it to go badly already, you're expecting to get thrown under the bus, then you may already be getting defensive in your own mind and gearing up, so it can impair your sleep. Interpersonally, we make a lot of assumptions about what other people are thinking. We tend to often engage in a lot of mind reading. And when we're assuming what somebody believes, then we can assume wrongly and get defensive wrongly, which can negatively impact our interpersonal relationships. If people just, every time they interact with you, you've already jumped to your conclusions and gotten defensive, then they may react defensively in response. I had a client, and I've told you all this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. I had a client one time who walked into my office. I hadn't met her ever before. She walks in, she sits down, and I introduce myself, and she says, okay, doesn't introduce herself. Obviously, I know who she is. And she starts out with telling me, I'm not going to those meetings. This is what I'm not going to do. This is what I'm not going to do. And I could have responded defensively by being like, well, where do you come off telling me what you are and aren't going to do in my treatment program? But she was feeling vulnerable. And her assertions when she walked in were her way of trying to regain control, try to see how much power that I, as the therapist and part of the system, was going to take away from her. So it made perfect sense. And I just sat there and I listened and I said, okay, what are you going to do instead? And she just had this dumbfounded look on her face after I said that, because in the past, she had tried to assert control and tell people what she would and wouldn't do, and they had argued with her. And instead, I said, all right, let's talk about the purpose of those meetings and what you can do instead that will achieve that same purpose. Cognitively, emotionally, when we are defensive, who likes to feel defensive? I mean, gosh, it's unpleasant when you're constantly on guard, when you're constantly feeling like you got to defend yourself, when people speak and you hear them say the words, but you interpret it in a negative light. You feel like people are always attacking you. That's unpleasant. And cognitively, it changes how we perceive others. The more you hear something and perceive it negatively, the more you're going to believe that it was intended negatively, instead of, well, maybe not positively, but neutrally, somebody trying to give corrective feedback, or somebody just sharing their opinion. They're not saying you're wrong and I'm right. They're just saying, I disagree. Okay. Why? Why is it so important for everybody else to agree with you all the time? And yes, I know I'm using extreme words. Those are cognitive distortions that also contribute to defensiveness. If we tell ourselves everybody's got to agree with me, or if this person doesn't agree with me on everything, then I'm not acceptable, or I'm not lovable, or I'm going to be rejected. Think about how that sets you up to be in a position where you feel anxious. It's important in communication to start out with a firm foundation. Recognize the difference between criticism of you versus your behaviors. Now, if you've had children, children do things that are not always right. Heck, if you're an adult, you're going to make mistakes sometimes, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you are a mistake. If your boss comes up to you and says, this report is just garbage, I don't know what you were thinking, but I need it redone. Now, that's not good communication on their part, but they're still saying the report is garbage, not you are garbage. You are garbage as an employee or as a human being. They're saying the report is. So that's first thing. Recognize the difference between other people's opinions and them just stating their opinions and your opinions. When we talk about boundaries, we talk about having this boundary here, and my thoughts, feelings, person is right here. And I can assert my feelings. I can put them out there onto this table, which serves as the boundary. And other people can put their thoughts and feelings out there on that boundary, which is a table. We're just putting it all out on the table, as they say. It doesn't mean they're saying you have to take my opinions, nor am I saying you have to take mine. I'm just saying, here, we're going to put it out there. Okie dokie. If I disagree with your opinion, then at that point, I've got to decide whether it is something that's important to proceed with, to discuss. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But we're starting with creating this foundation. Have people look back over situations in which they have felt criticized or in which they have gotten defensive, and ask them to evaluate what was said and whether they were being criticized as a person or their behaviors were being criticized. And sometimes people use unkind language. When you look at a child after they've done something wrong and you say, you're a bad child, well, that's not helpful, because then you're actually saying you are a bad person instead of criticizing the behavior. I love you hitting your sister. That was a bad choice. So that's really important. And we need to go back through and reevaluate our perceptions of what people have said in the past. And again, sometimes people don't say it the nicest way or in the most appropriate setting. And sure, you have a right to feel anxious or angry if they call you out in the middle of the meeting, or they say something to you in a way that is very unkind, like saying you're stupid. You have a right to your reaction to that, but you can say, hey, I don't appreciate being called stupid, or I don't appreciate being called out in the middle of a meeting. I hear what you're saying, or in the case of stupid, I don't understand what prompted that. Can you tell me what you think I didn't do right or what I need to learn? Okay, so help identify the behaviors that I can change. With the other person that called you out in the meeting, you can say, all right, I don't appreciate being called out in front of everybody. I am happy to hear your feedback about how my program is doing or my report or whatever. And I would prefer not to be put on blast because that makes me feel self-conscious and anxious and embarrassed. Take what's useful and leave the rest. And this goes back to that table. You're not always going to take other people's opinions off of it and go, oh, well, maybe they got a point. They put their stuff out there. They may even tell you why they think that way. And all right, I don't agree. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much. But when something's useful, you can take it in and say, all right, I may change my perception. Be realistic. Nobody is liked by everybody, and nobody's behaviors are liked by everybody all the time. We need to get away from those extreme words. There are people that you'll get along with, people that you won't. There are people who could be your absolute best friends in the whole world, but you disagree on certain topics. And maybe it's better not to poke the bear. I know with a couple of people that I'm good friends with, the subject of politics or religion, go figure, are issues where we disagree a lot. And when those issues come up, I know that they're not going to be interested in my perspective, and they are not interested in my, and I know what their perspective is, and there's no sense bringing this up where we might get into a even if it's an academic debate. Sometimes that can be unnecessary turmoil that you're bringing up. So sometimes things are just better left unsaid. You can really love a person, you can really like a person, and have some fundamental disagreements. We can hear what they say and pay attention to how we're communicating. If they say something to us that we disagree with, and we cross our hands and we go and roll our eyes, well, we didn't have to use words, but that was very aggressive. That was saying, I hear you, I think your opinion is stupid, or I totally disagree, or you're being a pain in my butt. Whatever that your nonverbals are saying, they're still screaming loud and clear. So we need to, if we're going to bring things up, we need to be able to listen and appreciate and respect the other person's point of view. We need to be able to hear it without assuming that they're saying, well, this is my opinion and it's the right opinion and your opinion is wrong. They may not even know our opinion. When I do counseling with people, there are things that come up that I disagree with them about. However, it's not my place. It is, they are telling me what their thoughts and feelings and beliefs are. And it's important for me to hear their opinions and their feelings in order to help them process those. My opinion on it is pretty irrelevant. We want to nurture multiple sources of support. Like I said earlier, I've got some friends who disagree with me vehemently on some very key topics, and that's okay. When I want to discuss those topics, when I'm feeling the need for support in that area, or I want to nurture that area of my life, I have other friends that I hang out with. And it's unrealistic to expect any one person to agree with you and be there for you and want to do everything you want to do all the time. That's just not realistic. Set and maintain your boundaries. Physical boundaries, obviously, those are pretty straightforward. If somebody is getting aggressive and getting in your face, yeah, it's very well served to start feeling a little bit defensive. You're like, not so much. Recognizing that. If they are being loud and they're getting in your space, what does that mean? What does that behavior mean? It's aggression. It means they feel unsafe. They feel rejected. They feel invalidated in some way. So it's important to understand that they're trying to get their power back. They're trying to take their power back from you if they are being aggressive, and we need to figure out how to meet in the middle, so to speak. Interpersonal. Your interpersonal boundaries talk about who you hang out with, for example. And like I said, I've got different friends and people in my life that have different interests, and that's okay. But it's important that I don't let one group control the other groups. Emotionally, my boundaries, how I feel about things, my emotional reactions. Maybe some people think the way I feel about certain things is silly. Whenever I see a stray dog or an injured animal or something, my heart goes out to them. Whenever I see a dead animal on the side of the street, it breaks my heart. It makes me sad. The ASPCA commercials, they make me sad. And there are a lot of people out there who are like, oh my gosh, just get over it. But I feel it, and those are my feelings, and I have the right to my feelings. Same thing with my thoughts. And other people have the right to their feelings and thoughts. Environmental boundaries. Now, those are a little bit different. We don't often talk about those, but that's your stuff. And if people are getting into your stuff, if they're going into your closet and borrowing sweaters without asking, or at work, if they're going through your drawers when you're not there, that's a violation of your emotional boundary. You can't feel safe if the people you're around don't respect your boundaries. It's important to communicate what your boundaries are to them. Now, sometimes you may be thinking, well, you should know that that's not okay, but shoulda, coulda, woulda, but didn't. Articulate. If somebody violates your boundary, I really don't like you going into my desk when I'm not here, or whatever it is. Give them a heads up. And if they continue to violate that boundary, well, then you may have to take more proactive steps. But most of the time, when you tell people, hey, that makes me uncomfortable, they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I was just looking for a pencil or whatever. No harm, no foul. You don't feel threatened by that person, which means when you communicate with that person, you will probably assume that they're coming from a place of respect, not necessarily aggression. Because, okay, they've accidentally violated your boundaries. You told them about it. They apologized. They were like truly sorry that they did it. Okay, sorry. And they didn't do it anymore. So, hey, what does their behavior say? Their behavior says, hey, I respect you and I will respect your boundaries. We want to enhance our self-esteem because it's hard. Even if we recognize and accept that nobody's liked by everybody, or nobody's liked by anybody all the time, there are going to be times when even your bestest friend looks at you and goes, yeah, just not today. Or I disagree with you on that. Okay. It is what it is. But enhancing your self-esteem so you don't rely on other people for validation is really important. If you get your life's breath by getting compliments, by being accepted by everybody in your life, then it's going to be really difficult when people disagree with you. And a lot of people who grew up in chaotic households, and I say chaotic, not addicted, because this is true in households where there's uncontrolled mental illness, where there's violence. There are a lot of things that can contribute to chaos. But in people who grew up in chaotic households, they learned that it was important to be a chameleon. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. I need to make sure that I am doing whatever that person tells me to do, feeling however that person tells me to feel in order to be safe. As adults, we don't have that. We are able to set boundaries. We are able to take care of ourselves. We're not reliant on that chaotic parent to give us food anymore, to give us shelter anymore. And that's power that we get, unfortunately, partly with age. But once we get older, we need to be able to recognize the difference between, all right, when I was a kid, I couldn't control this, and I needed this person's approval because I needed this person to take care of me. As an adult, I would like that person's approval, but I don't need it, and because I don't need them to take care of me anymore. So there's a difference. And give the respect you expect to get. I mean, that's a pretty standard thing. If you want people to be willing to hear your point of view, even if they disagree, then you need to be willing to hear other people's point of view, even if you disagree. And recognize that disagreement doesn't necessarily mean either one of you is wrong. It may just be a different point of view. Or it may be that neither one of you has all the facts and there's some third option out there. Try to be empathetic and curious. If you passionately disagree about something, what is informing your decisions? Do you have all of the facts? And if not, then try to figure out how to get as many of the facts as you can. Unfortunately, today's media and social media is very polarized. And that's true also with even journal articles and textbooks and things, they tend to be very polarized and not as fair and balanced, if you will, as they could be. Now, there are organizations and writers and stuff on each end of the spectrum, but it's rare to find in one resource both sides of the story. Just like when you have kids at home and they get into a fight, one child is going to tell you one thing and another child is going to tell you the other thing. And the child that was watching from across the room may tell you something completely different. And taking all of those perspectives into account to figure out what happened. What is informing their decisions? We all create our belief systems through every experience we have. Every time we have an experience, it forms what we call a schema. And that schema helps us interpret and understand the world. It informs our future decisions. If you've come from a history of oppression and trauma, then guess what? You're probably going to perceive things through the lens of oppression and trauma. Whereas if you've come from a different background, you're going to perceive what's going on through the lens of that background. It doesn't mean either one of you is necessarily wrong. It just means your experiences of the situation are different. Now, we already talked about politics and religion, the two things that you typically don't bring up at holiday dinners. Healthcare. What does that mean? What is important for people to get? What is okay? There are a lot of cultures that don't believe that mental health care is acceptable, that there's a huge stigma around seeking mental health care. And there are other cultures that are very embracing of it. It doesn't mean either one is wrong. It means both have different points of view on it. And it's important for both sides to try to understand the other one. Why is it that mental illness is so stigmatized in this particular culture? And hopefully they will explore, how is it that your culture is so accepting of mental health care? And then another one that comes up a lot is quality time. And this comes up in relationships, especially intimate relationships, where we want to spend quality time together. Well, what's your definition of quality time? Because one partner can be thinking, hey, we're spending quality time together. We're watching TV together. And the other partner could be sitting there going, what are we doing here? This is not quality time. This is just taking up air. Quality time is going on a hike together or volunteering together or doing something interactive. So it's important to communicate about people's perceptions and definitions of things. Explore alternate explanations why somebody might be critical or short with you. Typically, if somebody is defensive with us or aggressive with us, we're going to get defensive in return. You bring on the aggression, I'm going to defend myself. It's important to explore. If somebody was short with you on the phone or at the cashier or somewhere else, stopping and thinking, maybe it wasn't about me. Maybe they just had something happen in their life that was really bad and they're angry about it, and it just kind of came out in my direction. It's not about me. And that's really important. If I can have empathy and sympathy for somebody for having a bad day, I'm not feeling nearly as defensive as if I think, well, they're just being rude to me for some reason. A lot of the time, it's probably not about me. Consider where it came from. If somebody is giving you well-meaning, constructive feedback, it can put you on the defensive. A lot of us don't like it. We don't just go out and go, hey, let me get as much constructive feedback as we can get. Sometimes we ask for it and can get it back, but it still is uncomfortable because it's somebody validating, yeah, I don't agree with what you did. Constructive feedback, however, identifies a behavior. It doesn't say you are stupid. It says your choice here, not the best, and provides alternative feedback. You could have done this, that, or the other, or what have you. Destructive feedback is feedback that's either too general, like this report is awful, fix it. You can give me a little bit of direction on how to do that. Destructive feedback doesn't give people information to improve or to adjust their beliefs. Now, the mnemonic think comes up. When you are giving feedback, ask yourself first, is what I'm getting ready to tell this person truthful? Well, hopefully it is. Is what I'm getting ready to say to this person helpful? Again, hopefully it is. Am I saying it in a way that's inspirational? There's critical, you messed this up again, and there's inspirational. I see progress in your work on this product. However, there's still a little ways to go. There's inspirational. Is it necessary? Sometimes feedback may be truthful and helpful, but it's just not necessary. And can you say it in a kind way? And those characteristics are really important. I remember when my daughter was very young, my mother-in-law came here one time to visit, and she came in and was giving my daughter constructive feedback on washing the dishes. Well, my daughter took offense because she felt very criticized at that point, and she just completely shut down. My mother-in-law doesn't have a mean bone in her body. She was genuinely trying to help my daughter do it better, but my daughter didn't take it that way. And ultimately, was the feedback necessary? Was my daughter doing the dishes fine? Yes, she was. Was it the most efficient way? No. But that was her way of doing it. So it wasn't necessary. That was the only aspect of the think mnemonic that she didn't have. I mean, she was as kind as possible when she was making the suggestion. And we also want to consider where it came from, projection. If somebody is giving us feedback, are we projecting onto them the nasty motives of somebody else? Encourage people to evaluate their beliefs about what it means to be wrong, to make a mistake, or not to be liked. A lot of us have grown up in environments of conditional positive regard. You are loved if you're perfect. You are loved if you agree with me. You are loved if. And so when you're not perfect, it could mean believing, well, this person is criticizing me. That means they don't like me, or they don't love me anymore, or they're rejecting me. So we really need to evaluate the facts for and against that belief. This feedback this person gave me, does it mean that they think I am useless and the stupidest person to walk the face of the earth, which is obviously blowing up probably what somebody said, or are they providing me some feedback to help me grow? Think back and try to identify at least 10 times that you've gotten defensive. What was it about? Sometimes there's themes. Sometimes you're open about things, certain things, but other things you may be very protective about your beliefs. And then we want to start thinking, why is it that I am so protective of my beliefs here? My guess would be at some point in the past, somebody told you that those beliefs were not okay, and therefore you weren't okay. So you may be protecting your beliefs from criticism. This is something you hold near and dear to your heart, and you don't want it to be criticized. You don't want your heart to be broken. Makes sense. But we want to think about, is this person really trying to attack me, or is it they are just, again, stating their opinion and putting it on the table? When the person said that, whatever it was they said that made you defensive, why did you feel threatened? Did you feel threatened because it made you question your own beliefs or your own knowledge? Did you feel threatened because you felt like they were judging you based on the fact that you had different beliefs? What was going on that caused you to react and feel like you had to defend yourself? Were you actually threatened in the present, or were you projecting somebody from your past, like your mom, your dad, your ex, or just assuming you knew what they were thinking? They made this grimace when they walked down the hall, and you assumed that grimace was directed towards you, so you get defensive, and you're like, I don't know what crawled up your butt. Hopefully you wouldn't say that to somebody, but that's defensiveness. It's like, I don't know why you just gave me that nasty look. And the person may be like, huh? What nasty look? Some of us just have a resting face that is not as welcoming as others. And again, are there any themes? Do you tend to feel more defensive, for example, in the face of authority figures versus other people? Or sometimes, and I hope this isn't the case, do you get more defensive to your children? When your children say, why do I have to do this? Or, Mom, I don't agree with you on this. Do you start getting defensive if they have their own thoughts and feelings? Oh my gosh. You really need to consider where that's coming from. And if they disagree with you, what does that mean? My children are older adolescents at this point, and they still vehemently disagree with me about a lot of things. And yeah, sometimes it feels uncomfortable because they don't share the same thoughts about things that I do. But I also am proud of them for figuring things out on their own and coming to their own conclusions. And if that's their belief, then that's their belief. And I am going to respect that belief. Listening and hearing, general tips, set ground rules for your boundaries. If we're talking physically, you stay out of my space, okay? And physically, this kind of goes in physically, maybe environmentally. When we are having a discussion, don't raise your voice. When people raise their voice, or when people stand up, that's elevating their power. When people roll their eyes or cross their arms, those all can be perceived as aggressive or defensive moves. So we need to set ground rules. Now, sometimes I cross my arms just because I'm cold. And it's important that we communicate ahead of time. If we're going to have this discussion, we're both going to stay seated. We're not going to raise our voices. If we need to take a time out, if it starts feeling, too uncomfortable, then we will take a time out. If I see a nonverbal from you that makes me feel like you are becoming defensive or aggressive, then I can ask you about it. And we got to be careful how we ask about it. If somebody sees a look and they're like, oh, what does that mean? Of course, that's a defensive reaction. Instead, they can say, when I said that, I saw you make a grimace. I'm wondering if you disagreed with me. Maybe they had gas and, it was uncomfortable for a minute. We don't know. But making sure we pay attention to our tone when we ask about it. Ask with empathy and curiosity. Emotionally and cognitively, I'll do both of them at the same time. You have a right to your feelings and thoughts, and I have a right to my feelings and thoughts. We'll put them out here on the table. And I've done this exercise with people in sessions before, especially like couple sessions or family sessions. And I've actually had people write down their thoughts about something on index cards, and we literally put them all on the table. And then we start talking about, people draw different cards. They don't know whose it is. And they talk about their perception of whatever that is. And environmental boundaries. This is if I get up and leave the room, if I tell you I need a timeout, you will respect that. You will not follow me and start banging on the door going, we're not finished talking yet. Stop mind reading based on both verbal language and body language. Just because, again, somebody goes like this, maybe they're uncomfortable. Don't assume you know what their nonverbals mean. Now, there are some nonverbals that are a little more obvious. Being a parent myself, I could hear my daughter's eyes rolling when she was walking behind me. Kidding, of course. But there are some things that are just clearly disrespectful if somebody rolls their eyes at you. But still, it's important to ask about what that means. Stop projecting. Stop assuming that today's boss is being aggressive and condescending, just like the boss you worked for 5 years ago. Make sure you're checking your perceptions and your reactions based on the facts in this context at this time. When you're talking and listening, one person and one thing at a time. Don't unroll a list of done me wrongs, because that gets overwhelming. I'm going to talk to you, and we're going to talk about this one thing until we get it settled. And then I'll talk to you about something else, or we will talk about something else. But one person and one thing at a time. You don't want to be trying to juggle multiple conversations. At work, you've probably had this happen where you've had like 3 people in your office asking you to do things, and you're trying to juggle it, and you may not get it right because you're probably not giving each person full attention. So you may mishear or misremember what was said, and that causes hurt feelings, that can cause problems. Use objective language, not "you're stupid" or "this report is awful." Objective language. The choice you made here appears to be a bad choice because for these reasons, as evidenced by, and that's what I have them put in documentation for the supervisees who work with me. That's what I had my children do when we were, when they were young and at home. If you've got a complaint, that's fine. You can say, I've got a complaint. This is what it is. Not, you are a great big old meanie. Well, what is it that I did that makes you believe that I'm a great big old meanie? And let's talk about how to address that. Have a safe word and a de-escalation plan. So if you feel like you are getting defensive or being attacked, you can take a break and down-regulate yourself. It doesn't mean necessarily you are being attacked. It means you feel like you're being attacked. And when you feel that way, your stress response kicks in. You go into fight or flight, which means your body is not using your prefrontal cortex, your thinking mind. You're operating in your emotional mind. So we need to take time out to get back into what Linehan called the wise mind. And share this plan with your significant others so they can support and respect it. This is my de-escalation plan. When we're having this conversation, if I start feeling overwhelmed, I am going to let them know ahead of time. Mindset. Go into conversations, even if you're getting called into your boss's office, or if your significant other says, when you get home, we need to talk. I hate that phrase. Oh my gosh, I hate that phrase. Because then your mind starts racing about what do we need to talk about that you couldn't have just said, blah, blah, blah. So it can create anxiety, and it can cause you to become defensive going into it. Try not to assume the worst, but listen to hear and understand. Walk into the house. If they said, we need to have a talk when you come home. All right. Walk into that situation, not assuming necessarily it's about you, and listen to hear that person's point of view and understand that person's point of view. And then you can address it. For example, if you have that conversation and you come home and your significant other says, you're working all the time, you're never here, I feel completely neglected, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, let me empathize for how you might feel because I'm working 16-hour days for the past 3 months or something. And acknowledging how they feel, what their beliefs are, and then opening up a discussion about, okay, what can we do so you feel less rejected, so you feel less ignored or whatever. When you listen to hear somebody's communication, remember their communication is also communication, as is behavior. When you hear somebody's communication, they're telling you something that's important. So you've got to figure out, okay, how can we both arrive at some sort of conclusion or resolution that most effectively helps us both meet our needs. Take a moment to get grounded and reflect to see if you feel your stress level rising. If somebody's talking to you, periodically check in with yourself and notice if you feel like your stress level's rising. Are you clenching your teeth? Are you clenching your hands, crossing your arms, whatever it is you do when you start to feel defensive. If you know that you're getting defensive, you may need to take a time out. Validate the other person's experience and beliefs as theirs. I hear you felt disrespected. Not, I didn't disrespect you, but I hear you felt disrespected. And that was not my intention. I can see where that might have occurred. So you're validating their experience as theirs. You're not saying, yes, I was disrespectful, unless you look at the situation and go, well, yeah, maybe I was. But you're also not invalidating their thoughts and feelings. If you start to feel defensive, engage your plan. Take a break, or even just ask the person to stop so you can summarize what you're hearing, because you may have misinterpreted something they said 5 minutes ago. So stop and summarize what you think they said so they can correct any misperceptions. When you're grounded, summarize and ask if what you heard was accurate. If the person says yes, then formulate a response using those good old objective I statements. I feel like my thoughts, feelings, or experiences are being invalidated or trivialized when you say blah. So I got defensive because I felt like my thoughts, feelings, and experiences were being invalidated. Or I felt anxious about sharing my thoughts with you because I assumed you were going to invalidate, trivialize, criticize me. My anxiety gets triggered when you raise your voice because it reminds me of when I was in this past relationship and my significant other would criticize me and tell me I was stupid whenever they would get angry. Helping people understand, I feel defensive. Okay, that's my feeling. I have a right to my feeling. I don't have a right to take it out on you, but I have a right to my feeling. Let me help you understand why I feel vulnerable and why I'm feeling the need to be defensive. Other strategies: find areas of agreement. Look for ways to collaborate instead of conflict, whatever. Create win-wins. All right, let's see where we can meet in the middle. I can succeed at my job and you can feel loved and appreciated, or whatever your areas, whatever the topic is. What can you agree on? And sometimes that may be, we're going to agree to a disagree and just not talk about this subject because we're not going to meet. And the more passionately you feel about something, the more difficulty you may have hearing other people's perspectives without getting defensive. And so that's an advanced skill to talk about some of those hot button topics that you feel passionately about. Pick your battles. Only pick those battles that are actually necessary. And apologize when necessary. Engage the executive control network. When the amygdala, that's the fear and emotion processing part, or one of the processing parts of our brain, when the amygdala is triggered by a threat, it frequently strengthens the connections with your default mode network, with your autopilot, and results in habitual responding. So when you have a stressful experience, that strengthens the connection with your autopilot that says, this person is stressful. And every time you have another stressful experience with them, it just strengthens that connection. So your autopilot, whenever you interact with them, is to expect to be needing to be defensive. The executive control network, your thinking mind, helps you focus on the present situation in the current context and choose a response that's more in line with what you want. The executive control network, or your wise mind, can help you learn new skills and alter your beliefs so you can feel safer and more empowered, thereby reducing the strength of the amygdala connection and reducing your stress response. You can do this through rehearsal and empty chair technique. If you know you're going to have a discussion with somebody and you know it's likely you're going to start feeling defensive, practice it. Practice it till you can have that conversation without getting defensive. Identify and modify schema that pop up in your mind when you start feeling defensive, like you sound just like my mother, or use beta testing. Breathe, so you're down regulating. Evaluate the situation. Think about what's going on and talk to the other person about your thoughts and your feelings in the situation. You know, what's causing you to feel defensive? And then take actions. How can we do this in a way that we accomplish our goal, but I don't feel threatened or defensive? Defensiveness is a way we protect ourselves from hurt or rejection. Defensiveness is an aggressive strategy, which makes the other person also feel unsafe and attacked. You know how we all feel when somebody gets defensive towards us. They're like, no, who do you think you are? Creating safety is essential to reducing defensiveness. In real life and cognitive rehearsal of new skills using your executive control network, so when you're calm, practicing the situation, is essential to enhance feelings of safety and efficacy or effectiveness, and alter your beliefs in your autopilot or your default mode network. Are there any questions? Thank you, Kawenda. I appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoyed the day, Matthew. I'm just reading back through some of the comments. Yes, we are all wired differently. That's definitely true. Hey, Lisa. Glad to see you here. Hello, Elako. Glad to see you back as always. All right. Well, it seems like we are about done today. Doesn't look like any more questions are coming through. I appreciated you being here as always. And remember, we do have that 3-hour CEU Blitz this Saturday. If you want to learn more about the connection between trauma and personality disorders and or if you just need 3 more hours of live CEUs.